Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Cash Flow Positive. I'm your host, Kenny Bedwell, and today we're talking about how to scale beyond single family homes. So, right now in the short term rental space, if you're actively trying to buy a short term rental or you have a portfolio of short term rentals or a short term rental, you are buying a single family home. And that's fine and dandy. But as we scale and grow, the question becomes, do I buy other asset classes? Are there other ways to scale within the same type of space? And so today I'm going to break down the multiple ways that you can scale within the short term rental space. But here's the thing, I probably will forget or maybe not even think of other ways that you can scale because there are so many different ways to scale. And scaling is a definition that should be defined by you and not by Kenny Bedwell. And so I just want to open up your minds to the realm of what's possible and how to think about scaling and moving into different directions. Because that's essentially what scaling is moving not a different direction, but moving in an upward growth format towards your goals. And remember, one thing we talk about on this show is your goals are different than everyone else's goals. So it's really important that we understand what scaling means to you and create the clearest path towards that. Um, One of the things I've learned is the clearer the path, the clearer the direction. So, like, if I know what I want to do, if I know what I want to scale towards, and accomplish, the easier it becomes to be able to do so. A lot of us have a dream or a vision or an idea, but we never break it down further than that. And so my goal today is to inspire you to write down that dream, write down that vision or that idea that you have of what scaling means to you so that you can more easily obtain it. Okay. I think it's a great place to start with my journey and how I've scaled and where I am today and the lessons I've learned, and then talk about some of the other things that came from that you might not have even realized is considered scaling and that you might be interested in doing so as well. Because it's not just about jumping from single family homes to boutique hotels or single family homes to resorts or buying shopping strips or warehouses or whatever you think that next level is. I think in our industry, it's really just like people think, oh, I go from STRs to hotels, but that might not actually be scaling the right way for you. And that's what I want to talk about on today's episode of Cash Flow Positive. So let's dive into my story first. So when I started investing in 2017, I bought a duplex. I lived on one side and we wanted to rent out the other side. We call this house hacking. And I showed up at a meeting. This was in Buffalo, New York. And it was all these old geezers and they're talking about long-term rentals. And with long-term rentals, scaling is about quantity, having more doors. You hear that a lot. How many doors do you have, Tom? I've got 56. I have 105. Wow, you must be doing well. And the reality is each door is making me $200 a month. Like, to me, when I was listening to that back in 2017, I was like, that's not very exciting. Doors, and quantity and like $200 a month, they're just these like, I'm like, there's got to be something else out there in the real estate realm that gets me excited about investing. And that's where this guy was sitting there at my table, and he kind of had a different energy about him. And he was talking about Airbnb and how he just started Airbnb, one of his long-term rentals, as a short-term rental now. And he was making all this money. He's like, man, I'm making like 3 times what I'd be making as a long-term rental. So my wife and I at the time had used Airbnb and we're familiar with it. Like, you know what? We've used it before. What if we tried it out? Like, so I started watching a bunch of videos on it. It would, found some people who were the first original gurus of our space and was watching the videos. And I was like, man, I can totally do this and try it out. In worst case scenario, if it doesn't work, I'll just long-term rent the property. Okay. Now, obviously, that doesn't work today, and hopefully, you understand that from listening to the podcast in general. But back then, you could throw anything up on Airbnb, and it would make money. And that's what I found. I discovered that that property was making 3 times the rent I would have made as a long-term rental. It was incredible investment at the time, and so that's where I started to grow and want to, number one, purchase more property and get more involved. So the route I decided to take now. I was at a corporate job at Citibank. I was making decent money. It wasn't great. It wasn't, I wasn't like wealthy or anything like that, but it was decent. especially Buffalo is a cheaper area to live in. And so we could afford to go and do another purchase. And that's what we did. We went downtown Buffalo and we bought another duplex. The same idea. Well, I'll just rent out both on Airbnb and we'll see how this goes. And if it doesn't make any money, we'll just long term rent it. It's all about the location. We did this. And then we started to go, hey, this is doing so well. Maybe we should double down on what actually makes a good Airbnb, which is design, decor, amenities, quality, guest experience, all those things. And so we started to invest in the properties and then they started making even more money. More money. It's like, wow, we need to keep growing this. And so we did it again. We got another one. But then at that point, I'm like, okay, I don't have enough money to just keep buying properties, but I want to keep doing this. What do I do? And so this was kind of that first step where it was like property one, two, okay, and I made it to three, but I needed to do another step. And how I got to three, first off, I want to back up there because yeah, it was a lot of down payments, but also too, we were able to leverage them as long-term rent. So they were investment properties. And these properties are pretty cheap. Okay. That I want to be clear on that. Like these properties were 140, 160, $200,000 properties. So yeah, you're putting 20% down or 25% down, but it's not really that much money. You know what I mean? Because the size of the properties. So there's a little bit of advantage there where I was able to acquire more properties with less cash. And remember at this time, we're not spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars on design, decor, and amenities. We're just throwing in some basic furniture. Our first one, we got some used, a little bit of IKEA, a little bit of, secondhand furniture, some nice linens from Amazon, and popped it up and going. There we go. That's all you needed at the time. Things have obviously changed. So we didn't have to spend a whole lot into the properties. It was more about getting the properties and getting them going and getting them on Airbnb. And then as we were cash flowing, we snowball that and we'd roll that back into the property to improve them and they make even more money. And so, but we got to this part where it's like, cool, okay, now we're literally don't have any more money for a down payment. And we need some more rents to prove that these properties are lucrative so we can go get more loans. So what do we do at this point? And at that time, there was two strategies that you could employ. So the strategy number one was rental arbitrage, meaning you go out to a landlord who is renting something long term. You say, "Hey, Mr. Landlord, I will rent the property from you long term. I might pay you a little bit more, or I'll pay you what you're asking for." And in return, you let me sublet the property, or essentially you rent the property out to someone else or on Airbnb. Okay, I know that sounds ludicrous, but at the time, people were doing it. And essentially, that's corporate housing in a nutshell, where there's these apartment units where they're like, yeah, you can sublet for a shorter lease, but you pay us a monthly and it's guaranteed for 12 months or whatever. And so I signed a 2-year lease with this guy for another property. It was a triplex where we could rent out all the units on Airbnb. And so we got started and started doing rental arbitrage. And then I started getting this portfolio where I had about 10 units. And it was a time where it was like, okay, and notice I'm saying units, not essentially doors, units, doors, same thing, because they're apartments, right? Um, and then I realized that, hey, what can I do? How can I grow this even further beyond just rental arbitrage? Because one of the problems I'll credit myself this. I saw a lot of flaws in the rental arbitrage model because it's a quantity game, right? It's about going out and getting as many units or apartments as possible that you can sublet. But the problem is once the market becomes saturated with everyone doing the same exact thing, it no longer becomes lucrative to do rental arbitrage. And that's exactly what we're seeing today. Like I do not I mean, if you could pull it off, like someone let you do it, a single family home could work, but apartments right now, there's just too many. The market is flooded with apartments and one bedrooms and two bedrooms, and then you have hotels, and they've improved their game. It just doesn't really make sense. And rental arbitrage is usually in urban areas where they have stricter regulation now, where you can't even do that, or you have a limit. So that model doesn't apply. But the point being that the second thing I did, which you could do today, is co-hosting. So I got into a co-hosting business, and where I first just got approached by people, and I was told, "Hey, we are looking. We're wanting to put our property on Airbnb. How much money do you think it can make?" And I tell them, and they say, "Well, what do we need to do?" And I tell them, and they say, "Well, how do you know all this? Or we know you run Airbnbs, but like, what are you doing to be successful?" And I would just share the information with them, And the one guy just he goes, "Hey, will you run this for me?" And I'm like, "Man, I never really thought about property management." That's why I started learning about co-hosting, and googling it and what that all entails. And I did a few units. I started getting co-hosting contracts, and that's kind of scaling. Number one is scaling into co-hosting or property management, essentially. So once you have success, and this is actually a very natural pattern that I see a lot of hosts end up doing. So they get success. Step number two in that is they broadcast it, or they share that success. That's probably a better way to put it instead of broadcast. They share that success online or with other people around them. Then other people around them are like, "Hey, you're doing it. Can you do it for me? Because I don't know how to do it." And frankly, one thing I've mentioned this on the podcast before, people are naturally lazy. Okay. So that's just a fact of life. Like we want to do less work than what's required to do, even though we might have the means to be able to pull it off. We just don't want to do it. And so you can rely on that to actually build a co-hosting business, meaning you find success, you share that success publicly, people see that success and want the same thing, but they don't want to put in the time and the effort, but they know, or they think, or they're hoping that you will for them. And that's where co-hosting comes along. And that's actually one of the easiest businesses to scale into, is co-hosting and managing other people's properties, especially if you don't have a lot of capital. And in fact, in my opinion, go buy one property and share your success. And that's the one thing I want to sit on for a second here, is sharing your wins. Are you sharing your wins? Okay. Whether you are trying to raise money for a fund, you're trying to get co-hosting clients, grow another type of business, whatever it is, are you sharing your wins? Okay. If you go to my Instagram account at Kenny underscore Bedwell, and if you're not following me on Instagram or Facebook, please friend request me or follow me on Instagram at Kenny underscore Bedwell. Go on my account. You will see periodically, once every 2 weeks, I'll post, or my team posts for me, but we'll post about a win, a client win for the company, right? Like, hey, this client found a beautiful property. Here are the numbers behind it. Here's everything. Here's how much it costs to set up, and everything. You'll see those numbers, the wins. Are you posting your wins for your short-term rentals? Okay. There's a lot of people who are listening to this who have properties, big properties, small properties, whatever the size, they have properties already. Maybe they're, busy working professionals, and they're not really looking to do a co-hosting business, but they might be looking to raise funds, or they might be looking for other people to get money. And how are those people going to give them the money and feel that trust? Because that's really what it is when people invest into you and give you money, is they trust you. You have to show, you have to have a case study, but more importantly, you have to share. You have to share the successes. And a lot of people don't do that. And so one thing I'd like to encourage everybody listening to this is, are you sharing to do is, so first, are you sharing your successes? And if you're not, go out and start sharing. Something super simple, guys, and I'll do this every now and then for kicks, but take a picture of your, of a booking that you got for 5,000, 6,000, whatever, a big booking, whatever big booking you get. And frankly, it doesn't even matter the amount, just big booking, maybe a summertime one, 4th of July one, post it online. See how many people comment. Okay. It's one way to get started. Just sharing the wins. It's really, really easy to do. And people are watching. Family and friends are watching. That's it, social media, right? Your friends, quote unquote. So people are watching that. And if you're looking to raise funds, or build a co-hosting business, I think that's a great way to do it. But that is one way to scale outside of single family homes, is managing other people's properties through co-hosting. And I think it's become a really popular way in our space to scale outside of just doing and purchasing one home at a time. Now, the pros and cons of that, some people want to do it, but you're basically creating a second job for yourself. You're creating a separate active income format. And if you already have a W2 job that keeps you pretty busy, that might not necessarily be the best way to scale for you. And that's why it ties into earlier what I was talking about, is define what scaling means to you. Okay, so let's keep rolling with my story here, because there's going to be key elements in time where you realize of different avenues that I can take to scale, and ones I did and ones I didn't. So the co-hosting business was doing really well for about a year and a half. Um, And this is where I started to really, this is around 2021, where I really started to go, hey, you know what? I think I should be buying properties in different markets. I don't think I need to be doubling down in Buffalo, New York. And the reason why this came to me, it wasn't just like a brilliant thought I had. I wish it was. I wish I was that smart. But the reason why it came to me is Buffalo passed some rules where we had to go and fight and present and speak in front of like a city council and everything. And they just passed the rules regardless of what we were saying. It was pretty crazy. Like they didn't want our opinions. We could go and speak out about it, but it was stupid. And they passed these rules that didn't make a lot of sense. And it dawned on me, I was like, these cities will just do whatever they're probably paid for. These hotel lobbyists pay them to pass things to ban short-term rentals. That's what happened in New York City. And I knew it was only a matter of time before things were going to get shut down. And I had too much of a portfolio in a specific location that would just be completely wiped out if something like that were to happen, or a ban or restriction or whatever. And so I decided I needed to look outside of it. And this is how I created STR Insights, a platform where I could find new markets. And I started buying. And I bought the Watkins Glen property, and some other people used it, used the software, and found places as well around the country to invest in. But the point being is that as I tried to diversify, scaling wasn't just buying where I knew could work. It was diversifying the portfolio as well by location. There's many ways to diversify the portfolio, but the lesson I learned from that was to scaling involves diversification. Okay. And it could be asset classes. It could be as simple as just buying properties in different places. But that's part of it. That, or at least for me, that was part of it. And that's what I decided to do. And I started to cut co-hosting clients because, number one, maybe it wasn't making too much money, or these clients were headaches. But I also saw these impending rules and everything. And in fact, a couple of years ago, Buffalo just straight up banned specific types of short-term rental. All the rental arbitrage units couldn't do that anymore. If you didn't live in the county, you could only have one property, and it had to get all these like crazy different inspections, and that line would take months to get, and you couldn't operate until you get inspection. It's not feasible to run a short-term rental in that market anymore, unless you're living in one part of the house that you're renting out. Um, there's a lot of problems with that, but I caught that well in advance. And so I could exit, and I was already prepared to exit when that happened. But the co-hosting thing, it just didn't work out for me. But it can work out for you. It just wasn't what I was trying to do. I was like, I want to buy more single family homes and keep going. But the problem we always run into, and everyone who's trying to scale and buy more properties, is a money problem, right? You run out of money, which leads me to the next point of, using other people's funds to purchase properties. And that's exactly where I am today. And so now what I've done with scaling is I focus on my expertise, what I'm good at doing, and finding somebody who can bring in funds and let me run the show. Okay. Now, I don't operate properties. I don't have a property management business. That's not what I want to do. I make that very clear on people I work with. But the point is, I partner with people where they bring all the money. I don't bring anything, but I have an equity split. Okay. I have enough skills and they have enough trust in those skills to where we can find really good opportunities and deals. And then one guy I've got 4 properties with, massive properties where I have equity. I own the properties. I have $0 into them, except, well, time. I do have to go to them occasionally. So I guess there's the travel, but you know what I mean? Like like the amenities, all I didn't pay for anything. So, but the point is, like, I'm a business partner in this, and I own part of these properties. And that allows me to use them and to market them and share them as examples, because I got to not design. We hire designers, but find, set up, go through the whole process, deal with the contractors, the photographers, go check out the properties, make sure they're set up appropriately, deal with the operations, all of these things. I'm a co-host on these properties. Meetings with the revenue managers, all these great things. I'm still dealing with that, but I have $0 into the deal, but I'm being paid out on the deal. So it's just a time component. And I think that is, your people are giving me dollars to go make decisions for them, but I have to sacrifice time to go pull that off. So it's a little bit of, like it's kind of this like give and take thing. And as we scale, the point is we obviously want to minimize time, but at first we have to front load that time. We have to put that time and energy into growing the business and scaling the business. So at a point, maybe in 2 or 3 years, I'll get to a point where people will want to give me money and I'll have a whole team under me that's going to run, find, set up, do everything for me. And I'm not doing anything at all except being the name and the face and the brand behind everything and making kind of like a stamp of approval. But people are giving me those funds to be able, like, business partner wise, to be able to do that. That's inevitably one of my goals, is to get to that point where I have like a team of, where I build these partnerships with people and a fund and so on. I mean, I also built a fund for the hotel. That was this year, the beginning of this year, where we found a hotel deal and we wanted to raise funds for that. And, we had people invest in those funds. And so, but here's the thing, and this is what I've realized in the last few months, is that cool, I'm doing the hotel, but I realized that, man, I just bought 4 properties with this guy. One of them is more expensive than the hotel we bought. So you can't tell me that short-term rentals, going from single family homes to hotels, is the way to scale. Because I could say the inverse is true. Going from hotels, small hotels, to huge single family homes is the way to scale. And those properties are actually cash flowing way more than the hotel's cash flow. And so it really depends. I mean, I would definitely say, and this is why like I've kind of changed my perspective and where, like, you're gonna see me invest in the future. I'm not gonna just buy more hotels. I'm gonna buy the best deals possible that fit my goals and what I'm trying to target. And that might be single family homes if I can get the appreciation. That's really what I'm looking for, is appreciation. And it might be a resort, like a micro resort with multiple like tiny homes on them, or a retreat center or something like that. Or a property with a wedding venue, an event space. Like it really, really depends on what my goals are and what I'm trying to do. But as I'm scaling, I'm using other people's money to help achieve my goals. And obviously they can ride the wave of success with me as well. And that's like, for me, that's like my vision of how I'm trying to scale, is leveraging essentially other people's money, OPM, we'll say OPM to keep it short. Um, but going into specific properties that I feel confident for a number of reasons. And I say specific properties, like I said, I'm open to hotels. I'm open to renovation properties where we can force appreciation. I'm open to event centers. I'm open to micro resorts, things that make sense based on how the numbers, really the numbers, and locations. And another thing too, I put to that is, as we've seen the market change, this is really important for me because there are a ton of hotels, there's a ton of properties for sale, single family homes, there's a ton of event centers for sale too. Why am I not taking a look at every single one of them? Because they're not in the locations that I'm comfortable investing in. They're not in the locations where I feel really good that I can get the resources, the contractors to pull off these types of deals. That's really, really, really important when you're trying to make these types of investments, in my opinion. Also, too, the demand and the travel. I want areas where there's lots of demand, lots of travel. And so, although I know these places can do well in the middle of nowhere, I'm just not really willing to take that chance, for me personally. And that's how I'm not going to do, that kind of, I'm not going to scale that way, buying place in the middle of nowhere. But that works for other people, and they might want to do it in a specific geography. It just depends on your vision and your goals. And so what I want to encourage all of you to do is sit down, define what scaling means to you. And it might mean just buying, single family homes, maybe bigger single family homes. Okay, that's what the one partner I'm working, that's what he wants. He wants bigger single family homes. We can force appreciation, that cash flow over $100,000 a year. All 4 of them, well, we're launching the 4th one, but all 3 so far, all on pace to do that. Actually, one of them hit a year and it's already done that. The other one's about to hit a year and it's going to do that. And then the last one is well on pace, like the other ones. The ADR rates are going up and it's in the 1,000 ranges, which is what you need. And then that last one, the 4th one, will 100% do that. It's probably going to do closer to like it's probably going to do like 175 to 200 net. It's a pretty sweet property. But long story short, these things are doable. But it all comes down to like understanding what you're trying to accomplish and envision, and not just following what someone else is doing and telling you that this is scaling. Don't let the pressures of social media define what your goals are and what you're trying to accomplish and what you envision is success. I can't stand that, because it's funny. A lot of these, I'm just going to a little rant on this one, because a lot of people, when especially with the hotel side, they like think that's the next thing. And for some people it is, to be fair, it is. But the problem is a lot of people who are doing it, getting into it because they feel like that's scaling, they're doing it wrong. And they don't actually make any money at all. And there, in fact, I know some people who own multiple hotels, they make $0. They don't appraise either, or they don't, sorry, they appraise, they don't force that much equity into them, or they don't really appreciate as well, and they're kind of just time sucks. But it's cool that they own a couple of hotels or 3 hotels to say, but I mean, honestly, I don't really care. I don't care to say that. I'd rather, you know, have that money or that cheddar. So long story short, I really just want to encourage everybody here, or everyone listening, is like, what does it mean for you to scale in that perfect portfolio? And it could be a balance between like, hey, we have this, scaling could be as simple as just having enough to, for retirement or as a backup or for our future generate our kids, whatever that is. And I still work my job. I love my job, whatever. I don't think that you have to, quote unquote, be financially free to have scaled. But you need to understand what the next step is and the next step after that. We tend to underestimate what we can get done, in the long term, and overestimate what we can get done in the short term. Is kind of how I see things. I mean, we can accomplish so much in just a few relatively few years, but in like 6 months, we tend to be like, oh, I'm going to get X, Y, and Z done. It never happens. And so flip that thinking, focus on, write down what your goals, just get a clear vision of it, is really what I'm saying. And that's going to help you understand where you should go and what you should focus on. And also, frankly, help you know what to pay attention to online versus going, that's cool information, but I don't need to do it. I don't need to go down that path, or pay attention to that specific subject. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. On the next episode, we're going to interview someone a who has scaled differently, and they've scaled through multiple businesses. I never really talked about this, but scaling might mean starting other businesses as well that are relevant to the short-term rental space. And maybe you're the person who, and I've seen this time and time again. I think of my good friend Kim Fitzpatrick. Shout out to Kim Fitzpatrick with Launched Host. So she basically went from owning short-term rentals and found a problem where people are having issues setting up and needing help setting up their listing and their furnishings. And she literally created a business called Launched Host, where she goes out and she sets up people's property, their the furniture and design and all that for them as a business. And she's doing that all around the country now. And she has like a legitimate business for that. That's scaling in and of itself. Creating a separate business that's ancillary to the short-term rental space is a form of scaling. So we're going to interview somebody who's done that and is doing that in several different ways on top of growing their STR portfolio on the next episode of Cash Flow Positive. So I look forward to seeing you there. And if you could do me a huge favor, if you've enjoyed this episode, please, if whether on YouTube or on the podcast, I don't know if you can like it in Spotify or Apple, but like, subscribe, and if you haven't yet, please leave me a review. I love to read the reviews. They help me get through the day. So thanks so much for listening. I'll see you on the next episode of Cash Flow Positive.